Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ma'am.
Hey, good evening. Hi, Swati. Uh, okay, I think we wait for another 5 minutes or so that people can join. But in the meantime, if you have questions or queries or anything of that sort, you're most welcome to ask. And we go from there.
Good evening.
Good evening. Anyone has doubts, then you can. Too many doubts, no doubts, few doubts.
Actually, for me, clauses and phrases, what we learned was I learned in 88, I'm so ancient. So what you're teaching, the bracket and all that, that stuff was never taught to us. So I have to first sit and read for myself, do a reading, and then only I can.
What I have done is not taught in most schools anyway.
Yes, that's what. Even my daughter in 8th standard is not being taught this way.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not how it is.
I'll first revise it myself. I need to do my homework first.
So overall, it is actually a little bit about practice. You
Yes.
guys will have to practice, but it is not complicated to do. And there are other sites, etc., that you can look at to, get some practice.
Ma'am, can you let us know the sites with which I'm finding it very difficult, the noun phrases, the clauses, and the analysis which you were teaching?
Analysis.
Yes, ma'am.
Analysis is there in your book also. The same thing that is there in your book.
Okay. No, ma'am.
Analysis is definitely, and even the clauses and the phrases are there in your book.
There
So
in the
even if
book,
you're
yeah.
going by the book,
Yes.
you will actually have the same thing. It is not any different. The only thing that I'm doing is trying to also contextualize as to why we are learning it. But otherwise, there is no difference in what I'm teaching and what you're expected to do from the book. It is only because, again, the book does not have a multiple choice question set that you will have to figure out how those multiple choice questions are taken up. Yes, go ahead, ask.
Ma'am, I was going through the Brennan Martin because I wanted to see all the basics. I'm a commerce student, a postgraduate in commerce. So arts is
Brennan
totally
Martin
different.
is not going to give you the answers because Brennan Martin is not what we are following for this.
Okay, so I have.
So you have to go to the university idol has given you a book, right? So that is the one, and that is already there. Everything like noun clauses, noun phrases, everything is there. Brennan Martin will have things like adverb. It will have extra that you don't even
It
have
has
to do,
only
like
the
adverb
phrases.
clause of manner, adverb clause of reason, adverb
Yes.
clause of purpose. You don't need to know all of it. You just need to know what an adverb is. But Brennan Martin would still give you subject, predicate, object, complement, adverbial, object direct, object indirect. It's not that Brennan Martin does not do that.
Yes,
It
it
is
gives
just
us
that
the
it doesn't.
phrases and all. It has
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the phrases. I spent.
Correct. But it won't have genitive phrase. It will only have noun phrase, adjective phrase, adverb phrase, preposition phrase, maybe. I can't
No,
it's
ma'am,
not
it
remember.
has
there.
only three phrases.
It's
It
not
has
Yeah,
there,
it
ma'am.
adverb,
just does that.
adjective,
Yeah.
and noun phrase. Only three phrases it is giving.
Yeah, so it won't give you all the phrases.
So you
that is the
suggested beach, right?
I had suggested Leach. Yeah,
Leach.
Grammar for Today is
Yes.
the book that you get of Leach. But
Ma'am,
more
can you repeat
importantly,
the name of the book?
Grammar for Today, English Grammar for Today,
Grammar for Today.
English Grammar.
Ma'am, I don't have this background. I'm a postgraduate.
No one has a background, even if people, unless
Right.
they've done TYBA English Grammar, no one has the background. Everyone is coming from the school and everyone has done it only at the school level. So it's not like if you're commerce or your science, it doesn't matter. If you have not done English grammar in TYBA and you've not taken that paper of English grammar in TYBA, and even those people would be very focused on phrases. They would not be focused on things. So please don't think that because you've not done English that you're at a disadvantage. You're not. Actually, you're all at the same pace.
So taking that point, I would be the worst of the lot. I'm from a Russian background. I've done my Russian and I've done BA in Russian. So I have.
No, but it doesn't matter. Even if someone has done
what,
BA English,
yes.
they don't. I mean, if grammar is an optional paper in most universities, because generally the focus in BA is on English literature. So you do a lot of literature papers. So you're not really looking at grammar. And you may or may not have done phonology or prosody or something of that sort. But again, that is not necessarily going to help you with this paper. This paper is asking you to come up with a very practical formalistic. So if you're doing literary theory, there's something that you study called formalism. It is asking you to look at the forms and structures of sentences and words and try and figure out how there is meaning making happening through those forms and structures. So a lot of this paper is based on, if you're looking at the literary theory in English, then in English studies, then it is based on formalism and structuralism. We are also able to use that base to try and say how you can, go forward. And what I'm doing is trying to contextualize and explain where is the practical value coming in. So no book is going to tell you, hey, you know what, when you're doing phrases, by the way, that's a reading strategy. It's not something that generally is a very intuitive way of teaching. And that's not the purpose alone of teaching phrases. It's just that there is, as a result of teaching phrases, as a result of getting people to chunk ideas, recognize headwords, etc. in ideas, inadvertently, they do learn to read faster because they're able to chunk faster. But that's not the sole purpose of teaching phrases. Phrases is also to recognize how you could have constructed an idea in different ways. Maybe just use one word, maybe use 5 words to say the same thing. And how are you able to present your ideas as part of English literature also. It's not just language studies. So that's a site. Someone asked, I was asked, where can you go into? This is the site that I have put up. And I think if I'm uploading it on the video, I'll try and put it up in the description. If I remember to, I should remember to. So I will try and put it up in the description as well for those who have not come in. So you can try and, try and do a little bit of clauses and English grammar exercises from the book and about phrases and so on and so forth as well. So that could be a site that you're looking at. It's University of Glasgow that gives you the opportunity to look at it. So that's the site. It's the site of University of Glasgow. Okay. I'm not even sharing my screen. Yeah, wait. Tell me. So this is the site. Yeah, go ahead. I'm not able to hear you, Priyanka, too clearly.
The sentences in the book are relatively quite easy, the ones which are given for practice as compared to the ones that we have seen otherwise. So I was going through a few of the past papers, all right, because those were available. So I tried to see it and then I realized the sentences are like a big chunk of even 5 to 7 lines.
For clauses?
So that, yes, clauses and phrases.
No way, we don't give you 7 to 8 lines of clauses at all. We give you 3 lines.
No, in one of this.
No. Yeah, we don't give you that long aspect at all. Because we will, when you create, if I'm just saying, any student who is doing 7, 8 lines of sentences is going to give us crap, and we will forget all our grammar by the time we are done with 100 people's answers. So we don't do that to ourselves, no. But it will be long, as in you will have 2-line sentences, you will have 3-line sentences for clauses, But a sentence which is long does not necessarily mean that it has many clauses. It definitely may have a lot of phrases, but it may actually have many, it may not have many clauses. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
That's when, I remember going through one of this paper, which was in 2010, October, November one, because, one of my niece had done MA before. So I got her book for reference. So that's where I see, there was this topic on Humphrey fired, and as it appeared, he also missed his aim. The animal made at him, but Humphrey with great quickness dropped his gun. And there is still more to the sentence. So
This is for clauses?
Yes, for clauses.
2010.
So the entire sentence.
That's not a very long sentence. In terms of lines, it comes to 4 lines. 3 lines,
yes,
actually.
And even and swinging by the loser boughs was into the tree and out of the bull's reach in a moment. Edward smiled when he perceived that. So it's just going on, and then I'm like, I get anxious when I look at such long sentences.
But you have a lot of and in the sentence. There are a lot of main clauses in the sentence, and that is why it would have gone on. Yeah, fair. But you wouldn't, I mean, if you're asking from the exam point of view, you wouldn't find those all there. Did you do MA in regular or did you do distance education?
I am doing a distance, but my
No, 2010. The question paper that you're looking at 2010, was it distance education or regular?
In the distance education book, so I think it should be the distance education.
2010, it would have been a common paper actually. 2010 would have been a common paper, just that we split on the
MA English paper 2,
yeah,
October, November 2010.
Sure. Fair, but there is a lot that you can chunk, and that is the idea of chunking. And you can get, I mean, I have given certain question papers in the references as well. You could look them up and check from there. So for instance, you have a semester 1, 2000 papers, 2017 paper, which is this kind of sentences, right? This is the length.
Yeah.
It's not that you don't have a 2-line sentence, I mean a 3-line. The sentence 8, for instance, is quite long. Sentence 9 is slightly long. So it is not that you won't have any long sentences, or a sentence 6, which is also kind of long. It's not that you won't have any long sentences, but you will, I mean, generally 3 lines is where we kind of stop the length, and we break it up beyond that. So this is how the sentences would look like. And you would have one sentence in one question, not like 3-4 sentences ideally in the question. So that would be the case. Yes, Anil.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, yesterday we were discussing about short note topics where we were talking about various figures of speech. Now I went through our book. We went on to discuss many more.
More than what is there in the book. Yeah. You will
So,
only get what is there in your syllabus. That's all that you will get.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Just wanted to just inquire that.
Yeah, you will only get what is there. I mean, there is a lot more that comes through in that sense, but yeah, you will only get what is there.
All right.
Let me check. Right, so this would be semester 1, 2021. What you have in their syllabus is what you will be looking at. And there is that material in case you are not, finding the material elsewhere, you will have that material. So this is the material that you have. And one of the questions I was asked yesterday was that would we be getting an internal test on units 1 and 2? And yes, I did confirm with Professor Rathod that yes, you would. So if you're really looking at it, your introduction to style and stylistics overall are your unit 1, and analysis of prose style, introduction to phrases, analysis of prose, introduction to clauses are your unit 2. Linguistic stylistic analysis of prose passages, that's supposed to be passages. Stylistic analysis of prose text is unit 3, which is discourse analysis. And the 7th chapter is unit 4, which is student-centric learning. So you primarily are going to be looking at this part, which is your concept of style in literature, which will deal with structural repetition like parallelism, rhetorical effects of antithesis, climax, phonological, but you do have metaphor, symbolism, imagery. Imagery, we have still not done paradox and tautology. Irony, etc. was there. Please note, we have just given out here example. So some of the things that we were looking at is going to come in. So we will look at deviations from code, etc. today a bit. And the rhetorical effect in terms of what I was talking about as climax and anticlimax was basically the effect that it creates in suspense mode that it has. And you know, how phonological, grammatical, lexical patterns emerge. We will that was alliteration, phonological patterns, and how that structures is actually alliteration. So that is where I was coming in from in terms of linguistic patterning, right? So please note that some of these have been done, maybe not in the same manner of things, but they have been touched upon. Then unit 2 is your lexis and syntax, which is basically words, vocabulary, and grammar. And that is what you're looking at in terms of types of words, stative and dynamic verbs, type of vocabulary. Stative and dynamic verbs was what I did in day 1, which was he entered the room, he barged into the room, which is the one which is more dynamic, which is more engaging, dramatic in that sense. And then you have words which are extremely very, you know, that talk about existing, that do not give you the sense of drama or the sense of movement as much. And the type of vocabulary, whether it is simple, colloquial, you know, who are you addressing it to? So that was a question that we were asking again in terms of who could this audience be for? Like if this passage is written, who would the audience be? Those are the kinds of questions that can be looked at in terms of, and you judge it on the basis of whether it's simple or complex or formal or colloquial, you know, whether colloquialisms have been used. So today we will be looking at some of that to an extent in terms of student-centric writing. And the syntax is in terms of the relations, sentence type, sentence complexity. This is when you're looking at whether it's compound sentences or complex sentences, types of clauses, types of phrases. So that is where you're looking at in unit 2. Discourse analysis is about whether the, you know, whether there is a kind of cross-referencing happening, whether there is, you know, whether the passage itself binds together. Now, these will be more in terms asked in the exam in terms of definitions as well, but also how the linking adverbials are there and so on. So you can look at those elements of coherence and figuring out the speech acts, which they have given you also, and looking at the structure of conversation and new information. We will focus on some of these today and tomorrow. Application of the linguistic and stylistic approaches to the study and teaching of literature is what the student-centric learning is about. So I'm going to go in, and please note the topics that are there for short notes is style and stylistic devices, foregrounding parallelism as a stylistic device, imagery, irony, discourse, speech act theory, which actually comes from your discourse in unit 3, cooperative principle, cohesive devices, cohesion and coherence. Karthik, 1 minute, yes. And then you have these questions. This was in the older paper pattern, right? So you can get questions on cooperative principle and cohesion, etc. in those elements that come in 8 o'clock. So that would be where you're focusing on. And the other kind of question that you get is, which you won't get in the exam, what you will get is 2 lines, which is what we will try and take up today. And you would have had to, in the exam, prepare a set of questions focus about 10 questions on the passage after having looked at the content analysis. Now, of course, you're not doing that. So this is where your focus will be on in terms of the analysis. And so linguistic patterning, what does it mean? Phonological parallelism, what does it mean? These are questions that are going to come, and if you have doubts, ask me, but I'm not going to go over them because it's quite fairly explained and there is enough in that sense to, focus on and do. You will be asked more questions on what is the imagery like, or what does a speech situation really deal with in terms of functions, or what is the code, what is an imaginative function of language. So we will look at some of these elements, yes.
Can
what
we
I'm
do
going to do, right?
phonological
Yeah.
parallelism and synthetic parallelism?
No, because I'll tell you, when you're looking at, I can go over it very quickly, but I won't do much time, spend much time on it. This is actually very simple. It's basically what is parallelism? Tell me, what is parallelism?
Basically, when two things are happening together at the same time,
that is parallel events. What is parallel? So, okay, two things. When you say parallel lines, what do you mean by parallel lines?
Side by side.
So two lines which never meet.
Yes.
And they are going side by side.
Correct. So one of the things that you have with parallelism is in language is that they are two structures which are absolutely similar in manner. So you have a subject, predicate, object, subject, predicate, objects. I like thee, I love thee, I hate you. For instance, when you have sentences which are saying he is mad, she is irritating, they are boring, and you go on repeating similar structures, that creates a kind of repetition of structures. That is what parallelism would be. You use parallelism to talk about whether sentences are right or wrong. For instance, when you say, and I'll just go back and see if you can. So let's look at this parallelism in terms of what parallelism would be. 1 second. She typed accurately and is there parallelism here? In the second sentence, is there parallelism? Is there parallelism in the third sentence?
Now, what is there in the second?
It's there in the first also, because when you're looking at it, there is this kind of accurately and fast, where within the sentence, there is a kind of structural repetition of adjective, adverbs, both adverbs. In the second sentence, what you have is, there is, she is good, which is a predicate. And then you have your, adverb. This is in the first case, it is an AJP, and in the second case, it is an adverb, but it still has a predicate, complement, predicate, adverbial rule. What is wrong here? Why so what happens in the in the second sentence is that when you're looking at this, this is a noun phrase and it is joined by an adjective, which you can't have. It is incorrect grammar. And that is what you look at in terms of parallelism, is that conjunctions should join like ideas. This is not a like idea because this is an NP that is joined by an AJP, which becomes problematic because it couldn't possibly be the case. And so this is not parallel. So linguistic structures, syntactic structures would be looking at, whether they are following similar patterns. Parallelism will generally be talking about a pattern and a repetition in terms of a pattern. That is what parallelism basically means. And this is also true for phonology. Your pattern in terms of your phonology is going to give you a similar kind of an effect. So you have foul is fair and fair is foul, sorry, the reverse, but that's the kind of thing that you have in circular repetition. So you would have, whether it's a consonant vowel sound, or whether it is stressed, unstressed sounds, is there a repetitive pattern? So alliteration can create a sense of parallelism because it becomes a repeated pattern. See, she sells seashells on the seashore, as we discussed yesterday, would automatically create a sense of phonological patterning that creates a sense of parallelism. It does create an extra regularities, as they would have pointed out. And it can also be something that interplays with the reader, because it adds to the richness of how much attention you pay to it and are therefore able to make meaning of it. So they can occur at multiple levels, and they also can be both used for contrasting something or highlighting something or hiding something else. There is memorability, there is an aesthetic pleasure that comes in. So actually, these actually explain all of it to you in quite a similar way. What is more important is deviations. What you are looking at is deviations, and deviations could be where you have neologisms. Neologisms are when you make new words, logos words, new. So neologism is where you create new words and you kind of pass it on to, through the things. For instance, Google is a new word that got created. Every one of us has accepted it. Today, you have things like unmute yourself. Unmute was not even a word 2 years ago. Unmute is a word that is just invented for Zoom and Google Meets and all of it. And whatever do you mean by unmute in that sense? So that is a new word formation that comes in. And so there could be ways, and that is part of the open class category that we were looking at, right? So neologisms are a basic concept making power, right? So you are creating new words, but you're also through that new words creating and recognizing new ideas. You're creating new identities, new ways of describing things. And as a result, there are these new ideations that come in. So that is what a neologism has. It could also be that you're using a lot of archaic language that no longer exists. So for instance, instead of saying censorship, you say boulderizing, and whoever uses boulderizing now. And or instead of saying university, you say Vishwavidyalaya. In Hindi also, and the auto driver will look at you and say, "Kahan jana hai?" again, and you're like, university. And that's when they will say, "Ha, theek hai, baitho." Because who thinks of university as Vishwavidyalaya and college as Mahavidyalaya and so on and so forth? If you say Pathshala to half the people in Maharashtra, in the Bombay drivers, they will just look at you and say school. So archaism is where you're not using contemporary language, you're using older language, but it is a deviation. Now, why is deviation such an important aspect? Why would you want to say that deviations are important? Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, what is the difference between parallelism and neologism?
Parallelism was done and dusted. Parallelism is parallel structures, patterns and structures. Neologism is new words, and it comes under deviations. Parallelism is where you're looking at structures, right? Repeated structures that are there. And neologism is a kind of a deviation that comes in, which is, deviation is basically something that you're not using in the normal way. You are moving away from the normal way of talking. It could be because you created a new word, or you used an old word, or you used improper grammar, or you used very archaic and ornate way of styling, but you're not speaking the regular way. Anand, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to understand, ma'am, in neologism, when we are studying about the new creation, does it also cater to the new spellings which are coming? Like for YOU, people just
No,
convince.
neologisms does not cater to spellings. There is an entire different category for it. But neologisms, new means new, and logos means words, right? That is where the word comes from. That's a Greek. Both of them are Greek words. So neologism basically means new words. Is SHUD should a new word? No, it is not. It is just a new spelling. So you may have graphological deviations, which is where this comes in, which is where you're looking through the new forms. You have lexical deviations, which is where the vocabulary is different. You have graphological deviations, which is where you're writing of something, the way you present it, even whether it is handwritten or typed, and or your, your spellings in that sense. That would be your deviation. So you have different kinds of deviations that come in. And all of, yeah, go ahead.
Ma'am, then what kind of MCQs may come from these belonging terms?
They may be asking you what this is. Like if it's a new word, then what is the type of, which of this is there? From the text, basically, it would be asked, what are these called? And neologisms are also called nonstriations. So that is a kind of question that you can be asked.
Ma'am, can you give us one or two example of that?
I just gave you the example of that this is one of the questions. Neologisms are also called, and you may have options 1, 2, 3, 4, and one of the options would be nonstriations. You can also ask a question where they could give you this kind of a sentence and ask you what kind of a deviation is it.
Okay, ma'am.
Right? So it's basically focusing on what you have looked at in the text. And the text does give you this effect where it says that you use deviations, and writers use deviations in order to be trying to look at, creating a kind of ornate sense. Why would I use an older form of writing? Is because I want to give it a sense of historicity. I want to give it a sense of things. So you may be asked, why is archaism used? And then, options are given and you are being tested on it. But you can also be asked to recognize parallelism, just as I did here, where I was asking you which of these sentences are not a parallel structure. And the answer would have been that this is the third one, which is not a parallel structure. So while Priyanka did ask me, I said, no, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I seem to be spending quite a bit of time on it. But the point is that you can look at metaphor. I'm not going to go over it. You have metaphors where you're looking at synecdoche and metonymy, symbolism. We have not looked at these, but symbolism and irony we did, sarcasm we didn't. Paradox, tautology. Tautology is a repetition, but indirect repetition, which we have also done in school. But they have also given you these examples that should be able to focus on. So a knave and a villain are both the same meaning, and then how do you use it? Yeah, so I'm going to come back to this tomorrow because I don't want to spend all my time here. A lot of it is actually just about reading and trying to figure out what it means. Wikipedia gives you these as well as anything else if you're just looking at the questions. And you're going to be asked basic questions. You're not going to be asked very, detailed questions on it. So for instance, in terms of communicative competence, you're looking at the fact that competence is very different from performance. You may know a language rule, but you may still make mistakes in applying the language rule because your performance level is still not reached your competence level. A child may know how to say "the," but the child may not say "the" at the beginning because the teeth is still not formed. And with the milk teeth, they may have more gaps. And so they may not be able to say "the" properly. So that's the kind of thing that you look at between performance and competence. And, generally we talk about the ability that a reader has, and we do mark their performance standards, but there has to be a distinction because competence is abstract. Competence is where you acknowledge that the child may know, and how to elicit competence is unknown. So you may just assume certain things, and the performance is quite very much evidenced through your exam and so on and so forth. So language needs to be understood that it can't just be performance based. It's not just making you understand what is the noun phrase and what is an adjective phrase, but that there is something that is beyond it. And communicative competence basically is not just knowing grammar, but knowing the strategies to make up for your deficit in grammar. So you don't know grammar, can you still communicate your idea? So if I say Ram, Sheila, market, buy vegetables, and you know that Ram, Sheila went to the market to buy vegetables, or Ram and Sheila are going to go to the market to buy vegetables, and from the context you can make out. But I just needed to give you those sentences. So can I, if I organize it in a structured manner, and if I know the principle of structuring, then I will be able to make up for my deficit of not knowing which grammar tense to use. So I can say Ram and Sheila went to market tomorrow. You know, Ram and Sheila went to the market tomorrow, and you will figure out from the context either they went to the market or they are going to go to the market. And it doesn't matter whether tomorrow was wrong or went was wrong, as long as the context of strategy making of communication can come in. So that's something that they're looking at to a large extent. Varieties of language, the fact that we don't have a English and we have world Englishes, and there are different kinds of Englishes, just that much. I don't think that's even going to come as a question. Dialect and register. Dialect is, what do you think a dialect is? What is
The
a
way you
dialect?
speak a particular language.
So
Is it confined to a particular region? Like if I'm from UP, there can be many dialects in UP. The language is Hindi, but the spoken form would be different in different areas within UP, something like that.
So dialect is something that actually is almost like a language of its own. It has its own grammar, it has its own structure, etc. For instance, in Hindi and Maithili and Bhojpuri, it's not that Bhojpuri is a dialect of Hindi, it's almost like a language. But within Bhojpuri, or within, as you were saying, within UP, the Lucknowi Hindi and the Allahabadi Hindi are very, very different. So those are dialects. If I can make you understand, the Mumbai Hindi and the Delhi Hindi are so very different. So they are dialects. It seems like they're the same language category because of the grammatical structures, almost the same kinds of words used, except for here and there of colloquialism. But it has a different flavor to it. So that's a dialect. Why is it not recognized as a language? Because it's a question of power. We today recognize Indian English as a variety of English, which is a non-standard, a non-native variety of English, but it's no longer called a non-standard. We don't really call it a non-standard of English. We think about Indian English in different ways. And these are the kinds of things that they have where, you know, there is a difference in how Indian English uses English and how Great Britain uses English, in terms of 20 vowel sounds, and Indian English with just about 11 pure vowel sounds, etc. We don't, you know, how do you want to say z or j or z or j? These are problems that you have in a lot of Indian English. You also, in a way that regionally have Indian Englishes, which will emphasize l, right? There are just two languages in India which have the l sound. You know, the Marathi l. There are only two languages in India which have it. One is Marathi, the other you find out, but the others don't have it. And those are kinds of dialectical registrations that you're looking at. What do you understand by register then? What is the difference between dialect and register, and why are we doing this? We're doing this to understand that English, in terms of the way that we structure it, is not going to be the same. That there are variations around the world, and that they will all come in, and there could be colloquialisms or, you know, regional words that you're using. That's not Neologism. That is a colloquialism. That's a local way of speaking. For instance, native place. Is that an English word? It is not something that Britishers use. if you tell them that you are going to your native place, they're going to ask you, what are you talking about? That's an Indian word. That's Indians. Postpone is an Indianism. No one else really says postpone. We say prepone and postpone like anything, and prepone, sorry. We use prepone like anything out here, but they don't really, abroad and everything, they will just say it has been advanced, not that it has been preponed, it has been advanced. And here, if you tell someone that it has been advanced, they will say, aage gaya hai ki piche gaya hai. And that entire thing becomes problematic in a sense. So that is colloquialisms, non-standard variety of English that can create meaning problems. In South African English, a signal, traffic signal is called a robot. It is not wrong to say robot because it is a machine and it is automatically changing colors, except if you told any Britisher or Indian that take a right turn at the next robot, then they are going to be like, where is your AI, ET, where is that coming in from? So they're not going to understand it. But obviously that's a kind of word that you have in English. Now, what is register? Register is formal register and informal register. So do you have language that is formal or do you have language that is informal? Will there be certain technical features in writing? Can you use a conversational tone when you're giving a news report? Can you use very formal report when you're talking with your friend, like as if you are some Maharaja and Raja? If you suddenly say, we don't think that you are things, and they'll ask you, who's the we? And you can't just say that I'm the royal we, like the Queen's English. It's not going to be using that kind of formalism with your friends. If you tell your friend, for instance, would you please pass me the, glass of water? They're going to just say, couldn't you have just said water? Is that the kind of formal register that you want to use for being with your friends and so on and so forth? So register is that. And you can be looking at focusing on these elements. They can also ask you questions on style and stylistics, and style is something that's a broad range of how the writer is organizing ideas, how they're expressing their points. And stylistics itself is a kind of feature that is focusing on the strategies, the techniques that is being used by linguistic forms, or it could be stylistic reasons. Style is, of course, a choice, but it is also dependent on the domain. So technical writing, for instance, if you're doing writing of instruction cards, those booklets, then you will use imperatives a lot, do this, do that, switch this on, put that off, do not do this. Those are the kinds of questions you get. And if you are going to be writing it in for menu cards, then you're going to necessarily use a lot of clen form, right? Like anytime that you're writing menu cards, you notice, okay, just give me a description of how a dish is described in a menu card. Paneer pasanda. How will it be described?
Cottage
Any
cheese
dish.
dipped in red sauce gravy.
Chopped into fine pieces, diced with, sauteed with light oil, garnished with, pepper, lightly garnished with pepper, dipped in red sauce, and on and on. But you notice in all of this, it is always the past tense. Do you say, it will be dipped in red sauce, it will be garnished, it will be cut? Do we say that? No, we always use the clen form in menu cards, because you want to give the sense that the action is completed, but you also don't want to tell them that the action was completed, kab tak ho gaya, because no one wants to pay for that old dish. And you also don't want to tell them that the action is going to be ongoing when you order the dish, because that means they'll have a long wait time. So very cleverly use a past participle in menu card writing, right? So those are the kinds of things that you would have in terms of how style and stylistics could be used, in terms of that there is a linguistic component between style overall and linguistics, which is the clen, etc. usage. And stylistics is that linking component that comes in. So you just have to be, looking at it. So there is a repetition and parallelism that comes back again, and you can read through. I don't want to go in, but we were talking about foregrounding, and I think that was something that you can look at. Foregrounding can be identified through deviations, because anything that highlights, what is a technique that you use to highlight some information? So it could be that you use deviations, you use new words, or you used old words, or you used grammar differently, you used a lot of parallelism, but you did something to highlight attention. So it can occur at all kinds of levels: phonology, graphology, morphology, lexics, which is just the choice of vocabulary in terms of syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. So meaning and the practical use of, construction. That's what it could come in through. And for grounding, primarily that you see is the use of parallelism and deviation. So to go back to a question that I think Swati had asked is, what kind of questions will I get? You could be given options which says there are two main types of foregrounding, and be given options, and one of them could be parallelism and deviation. And again, be asked what is parallelism. So I'm just saying that you would please read through the chapters, because they constantly are repeating quite a bit. And there is simile and metaphor and imagery and symbol. What is symbolism? That I did want to do with you all today. So we can look at it. What is symbolism?
It may identify some symbols, specific symbols.
What is symbol? It does. Symbolism is, it identifies a symbol, but what is the symbol? Give me an example.
Yeah, if we have to talk about like if you have to talk about the north wind, it will symbolize more devastation, and it will symbolize cold weather. It can be, if it is, so that is symbolic about the north wind, because the way it blows. So that could be one way that could be symbolism. So if a writer has to just
There is
go
a difference between association and symbolism.
Okay.
There is that difference. So for instance, when I'm saying that there is, when I say a candle signifies hope, a flag represents a nation, red signifies, love, passion,
danger.
And danger. Celebration, because weddings or something like that, you could have wedding, and that comes from love, and of course danger. So it does tell you that this is danger. So that becomes symbolism. To a large extent, symbolism is where there is an idea that stands for another idea. The north wind is not a bad example to give, but the north wind by itself, the way you were explaining it, would also have a significantly grounded meaning in the geography of, the geographical nature when you're looking at it, that it does blow from the north and is generally a lot more colder for us in this country than the south winds will be, which blow from the sea, and therefore are going to be a lot more warmer for us in that sense. So you have the geographical things, then that doesn't become symbolism.
Yeah. Actually, when you explain or you go through the text which are written by the British poet or the British writers, when you see the word north wind, that means something cold and something frosty is going to follow.
But it is actually focused on the geography that they come from.
Yeah, of that
is
place,
why.
of course. Yes, of course.
So it is not symbolism.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
So that is association. That is where you're, for instance, when you're looking at it and saying, symbolism would be where you are imbuing anything with a quality that it may not necessarily possess, right? So for instance, you look at frost, which is cold. So you can't say that frost is symbolic of cold. It is not symbolic of cold. It actually has a quality that is cold. But
Okay.
when you say that frost is also, and when you say frost is also unfeeling, then
Yeah.
that becomes symbolic, because that is not necessarily a quality that frost has, which is of feeling or unfeeling. Now
True.
you've given it a certain kind of property that it was not. So symbolism basically is where we take something that is a signifier, like anything like, a candle, for instance, and say, oh, that is hope. That is the light of hope. And you're like, I don't think the candle emerged with that kind of purpose in mind.
True.
And that's what you're looking at in terms of hope. So you could do that with black, with white. Like, why do we say, wave the white flag? You could have waved a green flag also. No, why a white flag? And the
Why
white
it's a symbol of
basically standing
purity
for
and
peace.
peace. Yes,
Peace,
ma'am.
exactly. But that is a symbol. That is something that we have imbued it with as a quality. Water as purification it's symbolic in terms of rights, but water as a purifier is not a symbol in that sense. So, because it does cleanse, it does do a cleanse. So that's one of the reasons why symbolic and symbol are going to be slight differences in sense, but they have similar meaning. So you understand those elements. What do you think of imagery? What are the kinds of imagery that we know of? One is visual. We do have imagery that is visual. So you would talk about the fact that her skin was as fair as snow and her cheeks as rosy as apples. That would be a kind of imagery that you get. Am I not? I did not reduce my screen size. Sorry. Yeah, 1 second. I'll just do that. So visual imagery is where you're able to give and weave a picture for people. So that is what visual imagery would really be like. Now, what would
And
be
it is applicable for non-visualized thing also.
oral? So you have oral imagery, which is sound.
Okay.
So you may talk about oral visual imagery, which is that he was as loud as rain hitting and the tin roof of an empty room. Right? So now you have the sound that comes in that sense. You could have tactile, which is touch, right? So you have something, again, I'm just going to do that. Her skin was as soft as silk. That is tactile, touch. So you can have tactile imagery that is woven in. And yes, you will get questions on these before you ask me. How will I get questions on this? You can be asked which of the following, you can be given a sentence and you could be asked which of the following types of imagery is there in it. So that's the kind of question you can be asked. Priyanka, you had something to ask. Please do comment.
And tactile is the same thing, kinesthetic, or it is different?
Kinesthetic is where you are doing something, right? When you say that it is kinesthetic, you want to do something. You do something with your hands. So yes, but tactile imagery is basically touch. So the 5 senses, your eyes, nose, mouth, and those, mouth and ears, and those kinds. So you have all those 5 senses of things that has got a adjective form to it. So sight, visual, ears, oral, sound, tactile, touch, the skin, right? You also have olfactory,
Yeah,
which is smell.
Taste.
So
Smell.
no, gustatory is taste.
Okay, gustatory.
Yeah. So gustatory is taste. So what will you give as an example? She he reeked of onions and rotten tomatoes, no matter how much he washed That would be a kind of smell, right? That the smell is that of onions and garlic. Maybe I should just put in garlic. It won't smell, but tomatoes actually take away the smell. So his hands reeked of onions and garlic, no matter how much he washed. Gustatory would be taste. So that would be a kind of thing that you have as gustatory imagery, right? It is the smell of taste. So you are always going to look at it and say that she's so cute. It's almost like, you know, Rasagulla jaise ho kind of thing. And that is a kind of, it is not like you are not telling them about visual imagery. You're not obviously telling them that they are round like a Rasagulla. You've heard the judges say this sometimes and talk about voice and say that your voice is so sweet. It is almost like having rasagullas. And then you're like, okay, that's a way of describing voice, but it's actually a gustatory imagery that is coming in because you're corresponding and looking at the voice and not giving it qualities of voice and sound, but giving it qualities of taste in that sense. Ya malmal ki jaisa hai. Again, these are things that you come across in all these wonderful reality show contests. And you realize that we do use all these kinds of ways of describing something and extending it. So these are the kinds of things that you have for imagery. It of course makes it a lot more dynamic and interesting to state. Yeah, someone who wants to ask a question, please go ahead. So symbols can be, for instance, you know, when we talk about what a number can stand for, or symbols are basically used when you want to objectify. Icons can be symbols, right? And you have imagery that is often there, which can be looking at words. And this is the syntactic and graphological deviations that we spoke about. I think someone had asked me, how will you look at the spellings, etc. So E.E. Cummings, for instance, is known for the way of discarding capital alphabets and writing in different ways. And that is a graphological, you know, seeker of truth, follow no path, and not really use punctuation. That is a graphological deviation that comes in. So I don't want to get into too much of this. Cohesive devices. We will come back to cohesive devices also in the semester 2. So please don't forget some of these points that you're making of how cohesive devices are used. But anything that is enabling, whether it is a linking word or whether it is, you know, a construct of words, anything that enables you to understand meaning much more clearly is a cohesive device, and it lends itself to comprehension, which is what makes a passage cohesive or coherent, right? It binds it together, so cohesive, and that makes the passage coherent or, you know, comprehensible to us. So grammatical coherence and incoherence would be where I gave an example of she had eaten the cookies her mother baked. So how could she have eaten the cookies first and then her mother baked second? So that creates a kind of misunderstanding. A very simple exercise that I generally ask people to look at and do of what grammar, when you say grammatical competence, so Okay. So now if you have to read it, can you tell me what, I mean, when you understand it, what do you understand from it? Does this person, does this person, did the person fall down? Why did the person fall down? So let me ask you the
Because he
question.
was like talking on the phone and not paying attention where he was going.
And so what happened? Why did she fall down as a result of that? She was walking, and then why did she suddenly fall down?
So she fell down because there was a pothole on the road.
That's typically how you would look at it, right? Now, I'll just change the word pothole to there was blood. Now, can you tell me, did she fall down because of the pothole? I mean, because of the blood?
No.
So how do you know that the pothole did not come in because I fell down because I used the word I? How do you not know that if you think that blood was the cause of
Yes,
my
ma'am,
fall?
that person might get scared after seeing the blood and may fall down.
Possibly,
But
yes.
typically, the way that you structure sentences is cause first, effect second.
Ma'am, I
And
feel pothole or blood will not come only just because the person was checking messages and not paying attention, the person fell down.
correct. So this is the point that, it could be incidental information that is given, but we all will construe information based on where we come from. And that is one of the things that you look at and you say that if I say there was a pothole, how do you know that the pothole was not the reason for me falling down? Because, I mean, how did you think, some of you think that it was the reason for me falling down? It's because in your head, raste pe pothole hota hai, to nahi dekha hoga, they would have fallen down. But the other way around is that traditionally, the way that we structure sentences, we generally put the cause first and this effect second. So it may be that she fell down, and the BMC conditions being what they are, that, just her fall managed to create a lovely pothole and managed to create a lovely pothole around her. Or it could be, as pointed out, that pothole or blood is incidental, does not have to have, maybe she did not get hurt. And this is how I can create suspense. There was blood, right? So this is how a film will show it, a serial will show it to you, that this person is going, and that's how you get excited to watch the next day's show. The person is walking, and there is a screech of car that comes in, and they just show you flashes, and they don't show you jumps and sequences, and they show you that this person has fallen down, and then they show you a lot of blood, and you're like, oh, hey, iska accident ho gaya kya? Now next day I have to tune in, right? That is the way that you will get me to tune in. And then the next day they are like, he fell down, but actually someone else got hurt. That's the kind of anticlimax that they will do for you. But this is the way of grammar coherence building, where you could understand that not just grammar, but in terms of coherent structures, organizational structure that you talk about, is that organization of ideas themselves create a kind of pattern in our heads based on how we presume information, how we presume our world to be, and we create those kinds of structures. So that's something that you could be looking at in terms of imagery and symbolism. I am not, so I was actually not planning to do so much of short notes today. These are the short notes primarily, and you can look at these texts at all. I was planning to do student learning, so I will go back to student-centric learning. And I don't know if you have read this, but because I said that I'll do this from the book, so maybe I should just scroll down and do it from the book. This is about 25% of your, this is unit 4, so this is again 25% of your paper. And you can have questions on this as well. And I'll tell you what kinds of questions you can get. So typically, there are these parts where there is content analysis and how you formulate teaching questions by understanding what is the role of a full stop, what is the role of a comma, what is the role of a semicolon, how is a colon used. And so these are just giving you examples. You can actually, it's a lot of common sense that is there. What is the role of nouns? Yesterday we were looking, and yesterday, day before, I think we were looking at the role of nouns, how they represent ideas, and they are yesterday, material, non-material, but there is a lot of idea and focus on ideas that comes in, right? And how they create a sense of concepts for us, and pronouns that come in, and what is the use of them, etc. Adjectives, adverbs, what kind of stylistic devices are used, and so on and so forth. You're expected to be able to formulate questions on them. Now, that was what was there in the original paper, but obviously we can't do that. So we will be looking at formulating questions on something else that comes through. 1 second. Yeah. Did you have a chance to look at this, the right word, Imtiaz Bharkar? Yesterday I had said that this is what we will be, this chapter is what we'll be looking at. Did anyone have a chance to look at this? In case not, anyway, this is there in your syllabus book now. So I'm just going to look at Imtiaz Bharkar, the right word. Outside the door, lurking in the shadows, is a terrorist. Is that the wrong description? Outside that door, taking shelter in the shadows, is a freedom fighter. I haven't got this right. Outside, waiting in the shadows, is a hostile militant. Are words no more than waving, wavering flags? Outside your door, watchful in the shadows, is a guerrilla warrior. God help me. Outside, defying every shadow, stands a martyr. I saw his face. No words can help me now. Just outside the door, lost in shadows, is a child who looks like mine. One word for you. Outside my door, his hand too steady, his eyes too hard, is a boy who looks like your son too. I open the door. Come in, I say. Come in and eat with us. The child steps in and carefully at my door takes off his shoes. That's the poem. What did you think of the poem? Very quickly, what did you think of the poem? And why did, yeah, go ahead.
बिरयानी कुछ खाने को देना तुम्हें चने
Who okay, what did you think of the poem? I'm just muted everyone in case you want to talk, you can unmute yourself. Yeah,
I think that, you know, he's playing with the words and then creating different definitions with the same usage of words. Some words are very common, like outside, shadows.
so yes, how many people are there in this poem?
So we have a terrorist, we have a freedom fighter, militant.
Are they all different people?
No, there's only one person.
Use them differently.
It's a description which is making us think that they're different.
Right.
It's how you look at it.
Right. So how has, I mean, why is there, if you look at this, you know, look at the words and the verbs in Paris, and this is the kind of question that you can get. You won't be getting the full poem. You may get the first two stanzas, okay? So the first two stanzas are, outside the door, lurking in the shadows, is a terrorist. Is that the wrong description? Outside that door, taking shelter in the shadows, is a freedom fighter. The kind of question that you can get asked is, identify in the poem if there is, which of the following exists in the poem, which of the following does not exist in the poem, sorry. Use of rhetorical questions. Okay, we've not done rhetorical questions, but that can be asked. Use of rhetorical question, repetition, use of repetition, mapping lexics, mapping vocabulary, the verb to the noun, using collocations. And third, the third is, there is a use of deviation, So which one is not used in these two stanzas? Let me repeat my things: use of rhetorical question, use of repetition, use of mapping, not use, but mapping the verb to with the associated noun category. And fourth one, use of deviation. Which of this is not used in the given lines?
Ma'am, I would think use of deviation is not used.
Correct.
Yes, because mapping is there with the verb and the noun. And we have repetition, we have rhetorical question, but deviation would be the odd man out then.
Yes, because lurking and terrorist, lurking is a negative activity, terrorist is a negative phrase. Taking shelter is something, you talk about as a positive thing. That's something that comes through as, taking shelter with the freedom fighter, but you don't have deviation. You don't have what we were talking of, graphological deviation, semantic deviation, any of the deviations. It's just a simple straight sentences. So these are the kinds of questions that you can get asked in the question 4. Now, another kind of question that you could get asked in question 4 is, say this. You have these two stanzas given. One word for you. Outside my door, his hand too steady, his eyes too hard, is a boy who looks like your son too. I open the door. Come in, I say. Come in and eat with us. So I'm not going to give this to you as an objective question, but I'm asking you, why is there no quotation mark in the question of come in? Come in and eat with us. Why is there no quotation mark? Why is there no quotation mark here? Sorry.
Are we looking at an imperative sense of doing it? Are we looking at order?
No, quotation mark, right? If it's a conversation of you saying something to someone, wouldn't you use quote marks? Like, how will you indicate that it's a conversation?
True.
So why is there no quotation mark? Think about, read the lines ahead and then read this. Is there a reason why the person is not using quotation marks? How's the entire poem flowing?
Probably he's trying to talk to the audience. The poet is trying to talk to the audience, like us who are reading. So this is not a conversation between him and the boy who's standing outside, but it is a conversation with the audience. Are we looking at it that way?
No, I think he's not having a conversation with the boy. Rather, he's just thinking about the possibilities, if he sees somebody outside. So what can that person be? Who can that person be?
The entire passage is like a conversation. It is one word for you, outside my door, his hand to steady. The person is talking to someone.
Okay.
And so everything is a conversation. Why would I suddenly put in a conversation mark out here when I say come in, I say come in and eat with us?
Absolutely, absolutely. And importantly, that this conversation is between the audience. This is not between
Yes.
the two.
But it is still a speech. It is almost like a conversation between the
Yes,
writer and
absolutely. He's
the
basically
audience.
trying to tell us. Yeah,
So
beautiful.
yeah, and I don't need to, it is she, Imtiaz Dharkar, but you know, the fact that the person has put in, I don't need to put in the quotation marks when everything is a conversation out here. Um, if you read this and you have just these two lines that come in, I open the door, come in, I say, come in and eat with us. The child steps in and carefully at my door takes off his shoes. Which region of the world, if you'd say Africa, you know, Asia, Europe, America, Russia, I give you four. So Asia, America, Europe, and Russia, and you know, I took off Russia from the Eurasia part. Which or let's say Pacific. All right, so Pacific. Which part of the world is this? Can you say where?
Asia, ma'am. Asia.
Why?
Because that's our culture to remove the shoes before you enter into somebody's house.
And it would not matter if you're Japanese or you are Chinese or you are Indian or Pakistani, because all of us do take off our shoes. So you could actually ask questions of meaning making from poems, and that was the idea of it. There is an answer already given out here in terms of, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just wanted to indicate that you already have it. The poem is explained in terms of content analysis. In the exam, you were supposed to write something like this, not this long. This was a sample answer, of course, but also formulate certain kinds of questions. For instance, questions like, who is the you in the poem that the poet refers to? Is it the audience? Is it someone standing next to him? Is it the terrorist that he is addressing? Is it the child? Who is the you? And then when you realize that the you is constantly the audience, it's not necessarily someone who speaks next to them. Is there dialogue in the poem? And then you have the question of, is there no quotation marks? So just giving that idea of all the three questions, actually 3, 4, and 5, actually are talking about the similar kind of an exercise of trying to highlight for you how conversation is used and why you may not use conversation, punctuation marks in free speech, right? So that is the idea of it. And these other aspects, how many descriptions does the poet give the stranger? And then what are the kinds of verbs which are used in the first 5 stanzas? Are they negative or positive? Does the action of the person change to match the definition of that the poet accords? So by making students do this, and the idea of student-centric learning was that you don't give them, you don't tell them what the answer is. You just ask them questions, they answer it, they find the answers, and they create meaning out of those answers themselves. So that is what the, is it a stranger's actions that change the poet, or the poet's perceptions that change? Who is really changing? And why does the poet equate words with waving flags, and so on and so forth? I'm not going to get into this at all. So again, you have another sample answers and questions, etc. given. So you can look at these from wherever in that sense. I'm not getting into this. You can always look at this, right? It is there with you as materials, and it is quite explained again. So you can always look at this in that sense. But the idea of student-centric learning was from there. Now, what I wanted to do with you all is not look at that, but look at another place where you would have questions.
So a poem or like that will be given, or a passage will be given for which questions will be made, and we have to answer, or how are we going to frame this question? How are we going to get this?
You will be only asked what is the, like when I was asking you the multiple choice questions, I gave you multiple choice options, right? So it has to be multiple choice option wise. It won't be that you are asked to frame a question. You could be asked which of the questions apply to student-centric meaning. So let me ask you a question, for instance, if I am doing that. just trying to open something. These are, by the way, good references, even if you are not looking at, I mean, even if they don't immediately help you in exam. I'm not able to find the one that I wanted. Okay, in the meantime, if we go back to the question that is there. Yeah, I'm not able to find it. But if we go back to this passage and look at the last part that comes in, if I ask you questions on what is the rhyme scheme of the poem? So, okay, which of the following is not a good teaching question to make students understand the meaning of the poem? Okay, so that is a kind of question that you can be asked. And you could be given options. The question is, which of the following is not a good teaching question to make students understand the meaning of the poem? What is the rhyme scheme of the poem? What is the meaning? Is there repetition used in the poem? What is the meaning of wavering flags? Okay, if we go back to that. So that's a third option. And is, has the poet used a question mark in the question? And said, has a poet used a question mark in that line? So if I go to this point and maybe give you just the stanza, are words no more than wavering flags outside your door, watchful in the shadows as a guerrilla warrior? So I gave you that and I asked you, what is the rhyme scheme in the poem? What was my second question? Is there repetition in the poem? That was my fourth option, I think. And what was it? I asked you something else also. What is the meaning of wavering flags? And is there is there a question mark used in the passage? Now, which of this is actually, which of the following is a teaching question? And which of the following will not be teaching questions? Can you tell me?
Ma'am, rhyming scheme will be a teaching question.
It
while
doesn't
going
help
through
you
the poem.
construct meaning at all. What do I care if it is A, B, B, C, C? Does it help me understand what the poem is about?
No, ma'am. Understanding the meaning of wavering flag,
Wavering
it is
flags.
useful.
Yeah, that is the one
It is
that is the
useful.
teaching question.
Then
And-
repetition of words, students will recognize the repetition of words also in the given
But
line.
that still does not explain directly. It does not, while it may be a step towards understanding, it still does not explain directly that is a teaching it's a meaning making question.
So only one meaning of wavering flags? That was
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah. So if I had asked you, is there a, identify the figure of speech in the line, that by itself is not a very good or a very well constructed question for meaning making. So instead of that, if you are focusing and saying the first two lines end with a question, is the is that a rhetorical question? What is the purpose of a rhetorical question? That would actually be a better question to ask. What is the figure of speech in the first two lines? And because if I tell you, why is it wrong to say identify the figure of speech in this line, in this stanza? Can you identify any other figure of speech in the stanza than a rhetorical question?
Sorry, ma'am, could you just repeat your question?
I said, why is it wrong to, sorry, today my energy is really low. So, why is it wrong to ask a question on this stanza, identify the figure of speech in the stanza. Why is that a wrong question?
Ma'am, because I can identify two figures of speeches over here. So which is not a very great thing. And that will create a confusion in the minds of the children as to which one is right or which one is wrong.
One is that. The other is that you could have looked at watchful in the shadows as a guerrilla warrior as visual imagery. And you could have looked at rhetorical questions. And you could have also looked at the fact that even within this sentence, there is our words no more than wavering flags is actually, it's a metaphor. So while that is useful, what did I really want to do perhaps is ask, is the poet talking to himself? Does the poet want answer? Now, I could ask a question which says, which is more meaningful, which is like, what is the use of saying, why has the poet used a rhetorical question? Like, identify the rhetorical question. Is that very meaningful in a sense? So that's a question in itself. If you're asking that question, you need to say, what is the purpose of using a rhetorical question? That would be more meaningful, because then you will realize the poet is kind of constructing thoughts for herself in looking at it, right? So the questions that you may be asked is, one, what kind of teaching questions you can use, which is entirely, of course, you can talk about what is the rhyme scheme, what is the meaning of the word wavering, what is not the meaning of anything you can ask. But teaching questions have different purposes. If your purpose was meaning make, which is what this particular exercise is dealing with, and generally the question will ask those questions, will have it. Then you could be asked a question, which of the following is a good question for meaning making, or which of the following is not a good question for meaning making. So I purposely did not use the word metaphor, because metaphor is a good question for meaning making. You do need to understand that they were combining words with wavering flags. Why are they comparing words with wavering flags?
Waving over here and wavering, if you have to go and see, we see that in every stanza earlier, that we know the poem already, and in every stanza we have seen a comparison of a positive with a negative. So a waving is a positive attitude over here, where you are calling out to somebody, whereas wavering over here would be a negative thing, where it is kind of creating an illusion, or it is just going away. So if you see that there is kind of
Correct. You could do that, but waving and wavering by
possibly,
themselves.
ma'am, that wavering means the flag can move in any direction. So words are also like they can have any meaning.
And why flags?
Flags are supposed to be the symbol of a nation, of a state.
And you could be a freedom fighter for one state, and you could be the terrorist for another
state. Yes.
Same person.
Yeah.
Like Bhagat Singh is a freedom fighter for us and was a terrorist under the British colonial Raj.
Yes.
So that's the kind of thing that you would have as flag. Now, metaphor could have been used. Symbolism is definitely there. You could have looked at it and said that there is alliteration in the speech, and there is rhetorical, there is a rhetorical question in the speech. Now, that is another thing that you could be asked in these kinds of stanzas, just to go ahead and say what kinds of questions you can be asked, is which of the following is not a figure of speech in the passage? And within just those two lines, by the way, you have rhetorical question, you have symbolism, you have metaphor, you have alliteration.
Yes.
There is just in two lines, you have all of it. Right. So and those are kinds of things that may come in, and maybe there's someone says that there a simile used, or is there personification used or something. So that's a kind of questions that you can be asked, and I find it exciting. And today, really not in a very charged up mood for exciting, but it is exciting in a sense of trying to see how you can try and create a meaning for students by getting them to construct, by answering, by facilitating questions for them, and getting them to answer and find the answers themselves. So they create meaning for themselves. That is the point. I'm going to give you one last example of how we could be asking questions. I also wanted to actually do it this way around rather than focusing on the short notes and then coming here. But anyway, since we have already done the short notes, to some extent. We can look at these and focus on the questions. So this is again a very famous poem by John Agard. Listen, Mr. Oxford Dunn. So this is the name of the poem, and this is the name of the poet. He's a British poet. All of it not necessary. I'm doing poetry because it's much easier to actually take a passage line and figure it out, and we've not done enough poems in that sense. So me not know Oxford Dunn, me a simple immigrant from Clapham Common. I didn't graduate, I immigrate. For those who want to read, I'm sorry. For those who want to read on your own, this is the link that I'm just typing into the chat box. I'll also try and see that I will get Mr. Santosh, Professor Santosh Rathod to share that Stella Wala link with you all on the Telegram group. Anyway, the Blackstone. Okay, listen, Mr. Oxford Dunn. Me not know Oxford Dunn, me a simple immigrant from Clapham Common. I didn't graduate, I immigrate. But listen, Mr. Oxford Dunn, I am a man on the run, and a man on the run is a dangerous one. I ain't have no gun, I ain't have no knife, but mugging the Queen's English is the story of my life. I don't need no axe to split up your syntax. I don't need no hammer to mash up your grammar. I'm warning you, Mr. Oxford Dunn, I am a wanted man, and a wanted man is a dangerous one. Them accuse me of assault on the Oxford Dictionary. Imagine a concise, peaceful man like me. Them want me to serve time for inciting rhyme to riot, but I taking it quiet in down here in Clapham Common. I'm not a violent man, Mr. Oxford Dunn. I only armed with my human breath, but human breath is a dangerous weapon. So make them send one big word after me. I ain't serving no jail sentence. I slashing suffix in self-defense. I bashing future with present tense. And if necessary, I'm making the Queen's English accessory to my offense. So,
Amazing.
yeah, isn't it? It's a lovely poem. And students love it. But let's go back. I wanted to really introduce this poem and get into deviations from here. But you understand that this is deviation, right? Tell me all the kinds of deviation that you could have here.
So he's making up his own words.
He's not, is he?
Ent.
So he's using the old words.
He's using colloquialism. I ain't know. He's, of course, someone had asked about spelling, about make, mech is obviously dem, is dem. This is Black English.
That's
right?
that.
Yeah.
But
So
even
he's
in
using
Black
colloquialism.
This is how they pronounce it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily write it.
So
it could be
yeah, so this is graphological deviation,
Yes.
because it is, you know, it is not, it is taking the spellings and writing
Yes.
it in the sense. Yes. So you have that. Anything else? Checking it quiet, again, that. Anything else that you find? What about I don't need no syntax? I don't need no axe. I don't need no hammer. Double negatives. Is that good grammar?
But it is for rhyme.
Actually, Black English does use a lot of double and triple negatives. And it's a political statement why they used it. When you say, I don't see nobody on the road, what can it mean? I don't see nobody on the road. I do not see nobody on the road. It can mean I see there is no one on the road. It can also mean, it is not that there is no one on the road, someone is on the road, right? So that is all what it can mean. They used it as almost like a political statement when they were policed very heavily and were told to snitch on their friends. They would use double negatives and play on the fact that you could always take it in two different ways. And so I don't need no axe. Of course, here means that I don't need any axe, but it could be also interpreted to say, how can the two negatives in a sense come in as necessarily I don't need, I need an axe could also be the meaning that could generate from double negatives. That's a problem with double negatives. But in this, it is obviously I don't need no axe is a grammatical deviation from conventional writing. It is a colloquial way of writing, and that is a grammatical deviation. So that is a kind of deviation that you could be asked to identify. To split up U syntax, U is what kind of a deviation? Graphological. Yeah, graphite. If you remember, graphite comes from the word graph things, and that is where graphology has come from.
Yeah.
Graphite, and graphite is what we use to write.
Right.
Pencils are used from, and that's where graphology, the art of writing, has come from.
That is being largely seen in today's writing when you're actually checking papers, ma'am, because so many children are WhatsApping these days. So it's like it's I have to actually circle them up and tell them that excuse me.
So John McWhorter has this very lovely talk on TED Talks where he talks about how in Aristotle's time, they talked of the new generation who did not pay attention to spellings. Right? So there is, right from time immemorial, we have had spellings. The fact that we have something like ninth and, spellings do change over a period of time. So yes, I agree. I sympathize. I have students who do WhatsApp, and I'm like, people who are still typing on their cell phone and their mobile, I'm like, you can use autocorrect feature in your phone. You don't even have to give me the right spelling. You have literally not used technology even judiciously to give me the right spelling. So yes, true. What about in this third line? Is there a use of parallelism in the stanza of I ain't have no gun, I ain't have no knife? Yeah. So it will take some time to go. Yeah, that is parallelism, right?
Yes,
Because
ma'am, I think so. There is the use
repeated
of
structure.
parallelism.
That
Yes,
is
ma'am.
parallelism because it's the same. Only
Gun and knife both are used in the both the lines.
That's the only difference that is there. Otherwise, it is just I ain't have no gun.
Yes,
I ain't
ma'am.
have
Yes,
no
ma'am.
knife. So it's a parallel repeated structure that is there. So that's a kind of question that you can be asked. And that, by the way, if you notice now, it applies to everything. So obviously, you're going to be asked a lot of application questions.
All the paragraphs have it,
Yeah.
ma'am. I don't need no axe. Then again, I don't need hammer.
No hammer. Correct. They have it. So
again,
what about what about pun in the same line? I ain't in the same stanza. I ain't have no gun. I ain't have no knife. Is that a pun?
Mugging the Queen's English.
Mugging. Mugging can be used in two ways, right? Mugging is by hearting, like mug up the answers.
Yes.
And mug can also mean to attack.
Sling something on the company.
Yeah, so you can attack someone, and he's used it very cleverly that you could either be, rectifying the Queen's English and trying and failing at it, or it could be that I attack it and I destroy it, and both of it. It's such a lovely, simple word that really creates a sense of humor that comes in there. So that's another kind of questions that you can be asked is that, does the pun lead to humor? These are questions that you could have done in an open-ended class, but obviously in multiple choice questions, all that we could be asking you, and this was a question that you would have asked me otherwise for student-centric learning, is how will the questions be framed? So we can't ask you too many different types of questions. We can only ask you which of these are teaching questions, which of these are not teaching questions. Then we'll come back to just getting you to understand the poem. So we will ask you, is there a pun in this line? Can you identify? Or which of the figure of speech from this is not there in the line? So parallelism, pun, imagery, hyperbole, not imagery, hyperbole, and metaphor that comes in. So which of this is not there? And then you look at these and you're focusing on and saying that, well, there is fun, there is parallelism, and there is definitely hyperbole, because it's not like it's the entire story of your life is not just mugging the Queen's English, but yes, it is exaggerated. And so what you wouldn't have is the last fourth one that I gave that I can't even remember. So that's the kind of questions that we would unfortunately be asking you. So it's a lot of reading comprehension, and it is not really the way I would have really liked. I mean, this is a very, very interesting question to do. And each time that students have written questions, it has sometimes struck you as, oh, that is another way of being able to look at the poem. But that open-endedness is not going to be available to you in the MCQ. So you will get questions which are either which of these are good teaching questions, or which are these are possible questions that you could ask on the poem. Or for instance, one of the questions that is a very bad question to ask is, so which of these are the following, which of the following are samples of good questions, right? How many lines are there in the first stanza? Which is not a bad question to ask if you were leading it to something else, but it's not a great teaching, meaning-making question, right? So which of the following are that, which of the following is an example of good meaning-making questions? How many lines are there in the first stanza? Is there grammatical correctness in the first stanza? Is every line grammatically correct in the first stanza? In the first stanza, what is the rhyme scheme? And where do you think, what do you think Clapham Common is? So these are the 4 questions. Which of this is a meaning-making question?
Ma'am, the Clapham Common one.
Right? Because grammatical correctness, while it is good to ask, good to make them recognize is their grammatical correctness, it has to lead to some other question. So you will have to do that process of elimination and map the one that is the closest to meaning making very directly. It is not that you couldn't lead them by asking them how many lines. I mean, in an open class, you could ask them how many lines in the first stanza. Are they all rhyming? So what do you think? Why do you think the poet has chosen to write in this manner? Is it grammatically correct? And you could have clubbed all of these questions one after the other and got the students to think about, hey, this is not like a typical poem. Why is this guy writing in this manner? Because that is in itself, inciting rhyme to riot. And one of my students actually told me this when we were asking, so is there the things? And he was like, yeah, but that's what he's supposed to do. And he very cleverly, whenever he is talking about this particular sense, in this particular stanza, actually, there is more rhyme than there is in any other, because it's riot, quiet, dictionary, me, and all of it. Is there a pun in is there a pun in the use of concise, peaceful man like me?
With the dictionary, because in the dictionary it's written concise Oxford Dictionary, right?
Yeah. And that is how he has very purposely and judiciously used it. I mean, every single time he's like slapping them. This is the post-colonial talking back to the empire and hitting them back with one slap on their face, right? Like, this is it. And that's what he's talking about. Sorry, is someone saying something? So, yeah, so you could, you could have questions of this sort. I actually was going to do this poem and then come to deviations, but obviously we did deviations first, and so I don't have to explain a lot of what these deviations are here. But I think it's kind of explaining how you could use deviations for a purpose, right? In this, it is a very clear thing. Does this poet not know English? He seems to know English because he is very purposely using it, but he's also very purposely then giving you Syntactic errors, syntactic deviation. I immigrate, wrong grammar. Me not know Oxford done, wrong grammar. Me a simple immigrant, wrong grammar. Run on lines, a man on the run, and the run is the Black English, colloquialism being used. Why is colloquialism being used? What is he trying to talk about? Because this is the language and this is the kind of English that immigrants talk. And he's trying to compare himself to the lower class worker, to the higher class worker. And all of this you could have asked as questions and given as answers. But you wouldn't get a long poem. I will say that you will still get just about 4 lines or 2 lines, and then you're asked, what is a figure of speech, or what could be the kind of question that could be asked on this of the given 4 options, and those are the kinds that you'll be asked, right? So another kind of, yeah, that's what you will be looking at. So that's student-centric writing. Basically, if you notice, your entire syllabus is kind of finished. These are the questions. These are the types of questions you're going to get in the exam. And they're very repetitive over a period of time. So what you're really working on to a large extent is to try and understand, which is what your unit test, unfortunately, your test on internal test. I'm repeating what I said at the beginning of the lecture. You are going to have internal test on unit 1 and 2, which is basically the short notes and the clauses and phrases. But within that, you will still be able to formulate, when you're looking at clauses and phrases, it also means that it could be parts of speech, like, you know, is there, how many nouns are there in it, or what is the verb tense in it, etc. So those are kinds of questions that you can be asked on in the internal exam. It is still 20 questions primarily. So it should be not so much to do. And you can be asked what is the figure of speech in a line. And those are very, very simple to do. So you shouldn't have any worries. 8 o'clock. And so that is what you would be looking at and doing. What did I want to do with you last? Yeah. I have a question for you. In newspaper headlines, what do we see? How are they written? Do they have a tense? Like if I have to say something about, you know, Olympics today's headlines had women in the Olympics kind of thing. How is it written? Women saved the day for India, or
No, they are generally, I mean, PM says, or
yeah,
the women, the national football women team wins.
Right. So why do we have headlines in present tense when the entire report is in the past tense? And you notice, yeah, correct. So what happens?
So if something is happening in front of me right now, I'll be naturally getting attracted to it.
So the report is necessarily in the past tense because it is talking about something that has occurred in the past. Why? What happens with the use of past tense to a certain extent? And this is not that you're going to get a question on this necessarily in that sense, but it is useful to understand and look at how tenses are used. I use the present tense as Avi. I'm just going to say Avi because I can't remember the full name now. And, you know, is said that present tense will give you a sense of immediacy, whether it is in terms of time, whether it is in terms of space. It gives you the sense of immediacy. And so you react and you are eager to want to know more about. India won the World Cup is not as exciting, and it seems like some event in the distance past, as India wins the World Cup, which makes me feel more in the, you know, connected. The report has to be in the past tense. So why are many of our stories, why are they written in the past tense? Why can't I say in 2030 it will be? Even if you have science fiction, which is writing about 3030, not even 2030, it will still say it was 30-30. She went about her, on Mars or whatever, but it will be was. Why do we use past tense?
It wants to create an image, a very strong and solid image of what happens in the past.
But I am saying that it was 30-30 or 3040.
They want us to imagine because it's.
But imagine में क्या फर्क पड़ता है? मैं imagine तो future tense में भी कर सकती हूँ. I will go to the Mars. She will go to Mars. I can still imagine it. No, I could use it in the future tense.
So maybe keeping the reader one step ahead. That okay, the reader feels this has happened, so he's.
So
Probably
think about how a Jyotish in any astrologer who is trying to get your interest, get your confidence, what do they do? Anal, do you have a point? Please go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am, probably they want to ascertain it, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. Because they want audience to believe in what they're trying to say. So
Yes.
so that's why we say was 2030. I want my audience to believe that I was a part of that particular incident. That fiction story has happened with with me, and I'm ascertaining the things or the line or the cause effect.
So this is something that happens with history, right? I mean, history could tell you a lot of lies, but we still use a lot of past tense because it just gives a false sense of security to the person reading it, that I could go and check and verify that this happened. Imagine, for instance, this is something that I will tell you that children do, or we have all done. Parents ask, ki homework kar diya kya? All right. And the child is like, if the child says, हाँ मैं खेल के आने के बाद करूँगा, right? The parent will be like, get lost. I don't believe you. You will not do it. You do your homework and then go. Now the child says, ha, kar diya hai. Kar diya. That is past. That is action done, right? Sham ko kar diya tha, or something of that sort. Now the child is lying in this second case, but the child is going to be more likely to be believed because the child said it is done. And that is such simple way of looking at how the past tense can be. The past tense gives you the sense that you can go back and verify because the action is done. There is some kind of thing where you can go back and verify. Can I verify what happens in the future? I can't. So one of the things that astrologers love doing to get your confidence is they will tell you about events that happened in your past first, because it happened. And then over a period of time, they kind of just weave in the other things that they will tell you will happen. And then you're like, हाँ, वो बोला था, वो बोला था, वो बोला था, ये सच है, ये सच है, ये सच है, ये भी सच होगा. That's how they do it. So this is something that really comes through in the use of past tense and present tense, and how tense is used in a way to create an impression, which is why you don't find too many novels in the future, because future is so rarely believable. And the one thing that you have to do in literature is create a world of imagination, yes, but create a world of imagination such that the suspension of disbelief is possible for the reader, and that's so difficult if it were happening all in the future. It has to be something that I can cater to. So it is either the past tense, at most the present tense. But these are kinds of questions when you are dealing with and you're reading. At any point in time, if you want to get involved and engage with stylistic and linguistic analysis, these are questions you can ask yourself. And that is what linguistic and stylistic analysis is really asking you to do. Think a little bit more about how this has been used and presented as an idea, and think a little bit more about why might it be that the writer has used this kind of tool to create this kind of impression. What could this have been said in any other way? Why this particular way? Or how this particular way creates some kind of imagination in my mind. Those are kinds of questions that is why this paper is there, right? So yes, so with that, I'm done with the portion. I will take a lecture tomorrow, but it is doubt solving. So if you don't have doubts, then we are just going to be talking, because I'm just leaving that open for doubt solving. I hope that it's kind of you know, made you feel, do you feel now that you can get your 40%, Mr. What is the passing mark? Do you feel you can
Yes,
now get
ma'am.
your 40%? Yes? Yeah, so that,
Try.
I'm sure you can get much more. Yeah.
I told myself today, actually, I was reading fiction before this, and I dozed off after reading. And in my dreams, there were this plateau and all those dancing in my brain. I woke up. So what the hell was that? So I have literally dived into this portion, but you know what? I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah. That's
Be aware.
all. And it's not going to be that difficult. Don't worry about this
But
paper
Miss,
in that
actually, when I see these kind of slides, I love the way you talk. You're perfect teacher. But the thing is, I'm not getting a little connected looking at this scientific equation. It reminds me of Einstein. And seriously,
Einstein never wrote like this. Einstein was one of the horribly messy writers. Okay, if you look,
look
at
at
the
this.
books. Yeah, but I
Looks
do
like-
understand why this is there. This is the
Yes.
slide that gets everyone irritated. More irritated is the slide that gets them is, you know, when I start looking at these kinds of clause analysis. They're like,
I
why
was
are
just-
we doing this?
I was just inside. My puppy doesn't like me sitting like that. He scolded me and he ran away right now. But my mom told me, if you fail this thing, you're out of the house. I'm like, okay, ma'am. What the hell? Now,
Good
that's a circle.
for your mother. All
Now,
right.
that's
So
assertive
yes.
and it has an
Now,
anticlimax.
yeah.
That's good.
It does. It's. I don't think she means it as an anticlimax. I
No,
think
no,
she
no,
means it
but
perfectly.
The thing is, no, I'm sorry to cut you. This thing means a lot to me. I can express it in any way, but I'm really trying hard to get it inside my brain. It means a
So-
lot to me.
So one thing that you could be looking, and all of you could be looking at, is the just keep going back to the book that is given, because a lot of the questions will kind of adhere to that book standards, for the simple reason that we do know that you've not had enough time. Any one of you has not had enough time, and you're also coping with a very difficult time in terms of COVID and all the kinds of pressures. Either we are working, not working. Even if we are not working, there's all this burden at home that is coming in. So everyone is aware, teachers are aware. So I don't think it is going to be that difficult, and you can actually have a go at it. I will say that the university pass percentage from 2019 was at 62%, and in 2020 was at 92 or 93%. And every one of us was like aghast and saying, oh my God, what has MCQ done to us? But that's a good thing for y'all, okay? That's
So
a very good
2021
thing for
could be
you.
100% passing.
No, because we always have someone who will not. But it was 93, and we were like, what is wrong? Because MCQs are that way, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you read the question, you have those 4 options. A lot of it in literature, at least in this paper, is going to be a lot about common sense and your confidence in being able to understand. I'm not saying you shouldn't know what a noun phrase is or whatever, but that's something you've also done in school, and it's not like it's rocket science. You've done this in school as well. In fact, I could give some of the papers to the question papers to the 7th standard or 9th standard child maybe, and they could get a lot of the answers. You've already done this. You just have to go back and kind of refresh your memory with a calm mind. That's very important. And the rest of it is actually about being able to read and analyze. So this paper is very application oriented. In fact, I would always tell students, you should go and watch a movie and not study the day before the exam, because that's much better than doing
already.
But in the other papers, it is basically memory. And that is also something that you will be able to write on, because that's something we are very accustomed to in the Indian education system. So either way, you guys should not be worried. And if you have any doubts, and of course, we'll have the class tomorrow, and I will also see whether there's something missed out. But if you can also go through your book, even if you all divide amongst yourself, because I assume that you all have another WhatsApp group or something like that based on conversations. Yes. So then just divide amongst yourself and figure out where your doubts are. What I will do, and I had this always comes up, is some aspect of revision with clause and phrase analysis, right? I mean, that's something that students
Ma'am,
generally...
I have a doubt, ma'am.
Yeah, Sheila.
Ma'am, you had there are 4 units for this exam.
Right.
4 units. And you had said for internal exam, maybe I missed when sir had
The
talked
first
about
and
this.
second unit.
First and the second unit. So, ma'am, for this exam, we have to study for all the
All.
units for the
Yeah,
main exam. Plus, we will have the first 2 units for internal exam. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that is for all your papers. That's a university decision. I just confirmed it with him last night.
Okay, okay, ma'am. And when will we have this internals? After this main
Date
exam?
not decided. Yeah, it is after your main exam, so the dates are not decided. So what you have in your first unit, and I'm just going to go back to this, your chapters 1 and 2.
2, yes, ma'am.
Are your unit 1.
1.
Your chapters 3 and 4 are your unit 2. Your chapters 5 and 6 are
6
your
are
unit
unit
3,
3.
and 7 is your unit 4.
So,
Yeah,
ma'am, if we
so-
have done with our main exam, if we have already
You don't have to
studied
study.
again, no? Okay. But the first part is
Why? And I was
difficult.
like, ye kyun kar rahe hain hum? But then that is because timelines are like that. So that's why.
Okay,
So I
thank
was
you,
like,
ma'am.
okay, fine. Yeah. So it's going to be similar kinds of questions. In fact, that's good, because in case you find that the questions are, slightly different, you can still kind of brush up on the types of questions that you will get. But I've already done an overview of what kinds of questions you can get in these, and it's not that complicated. You can get questions as a comparison. So one of the questions that you could get is, for instance, a comparison between two objects or two entities that does not use a linking word is known as simile, metaphor, hyperbole, tautology. And then you choose metaphor because it does not use a linking word. Something that uses a linking word is known as a simile. So those kinds of definition type questions can also come, or you can be asked identify which figure of speech is there in this which line, that kind of question. So you don't have to worry too much.
So 40% is passing. That's it.
20 out of 50. Yes, that's 40%. That's passing. Anal, you had a question?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask whether all the units are going to have equal marks distribution. Like we
For your other papers, yes. For this paper, I'll tell you what will happen, Anal, is that if you noticed, on paper, yes. On paper, yes. But what if you noticed the kinds of questions I was asking you in terms of identifying figure of speech, identifying the meaning of a word, identifying why this has been used? That comes in unit 4. It is a part of unit 3 because discourse analysis was all about, recognize this, identify why, and all of it. And it's also part of unit 1 because there are only so many definition questions that we can ask. So we'll ask you which of this is it. That's again seeming like what unit 4 is. So if you look at the paper, about 75% of your paper is going to have similar kinds of questions. So it's going to be very difficult for you to identify, acha, ye unit 1 hai, ya unit 5 hai. Unit 4 hai. Yeah. This paper, you won't be able to recognize it as much. But in theory, yes, it is 25% worth. It is evenly, it's not evenly because it's whatever number of questions, but it is, 7 and, it would be 12 and 13, that kind of questions. So yeah, almost evenly distributed.
Actually, and if it was a theory paper, if you would have actually written not your paper, but the other theory papers, then, as a regular university or rather a Mumbai University student, you actually choose and pick your portion, correct? Like you do half of it
I know.
But then this is possible with your MCQs because then you need to know the novel, because I was looking at it like, okay, even if I do 3 of the 6, probably it will help. But now with MCQs, I don't think that will help.
You need to know, I'll tell you what you need to know with the novels is you need to know the basic plot line, the Wikipedia novel story. Yeah. We are not in a position, and we're very aware that we are not in a position to ask very deep questions on the novel. So we need to ask questions on what is the theme of the novels? What are the kinds of, how many, in chapters, if the Wikipedia summary, like you would have an, these happened in this chapter, or this came after this event, or something like that, where the story chronology is pointed out. The character names are given, the place and setting is given, the thematic is given. So very detailed, the Wikipedia page of a well-written review of a novel. That's it. We know that we can't go beyond it. Whereas in the exam, obviously, the kinds of questions we were able to ask was a little bit more of, what does this scene really have to do with that? But now we can't really. So
Awesome.
many of the questions are really simple, actually. They're not complex.
The question has increased by 3 novels, no, ma'am.
Yeah, but the other way around, the depth of your reading has
correct. That's
really gone. It is no longer MA literature. It is just like 6 Wikipedia pages padho. But it is, I'm not denying. I mean, it's really unfair, and I'm not denying it. But
and in fact, we had another professor talking to us the other day, and he mentioned that they may ask us 4 writers, and they will ask us whether this person falls in the category of this novel as a novelist in this particular theme. So I found that question quite burdening, because
no, but from the syllabus. It is all from the syllabus. Those 4 novelists will be from the syllabus. So basically, you need to know your syllabus very well. Literally, the last time I saw the fiction question paper, I was like, 10 questions of fiction, syllabus padke. Only reading the syllabus, not the novels, only syllabus. You could have still answered 10 of those questions.
Okay.
Because it was like, which of these novelists is whatever, I can't remember now. But say which of these novelists is a post-colonial writer, and your topic said post-colonial writer, and this guy who was mentioned in the options is one of the 2 post-colonial writers. Of course, I had to choose him. That was the answer. That was like syllabus dekh ke padho that kind. So yeah, some of the questions, there's a reason why the pass percentage, it came in newspapers, right? And the pass percentage jumped to 93. We were like, that's bad news. So
good news, come on.
No, then you have, it's good, not good news. It's not a bad news from 93% pass. It is bad news from the fact that then the curve is suddenly skewed, right, over a year. What happens is that because the entire world is facing a problem, they are not going to question the university results. But if the entire world were not facing this problem, then Mumbai University results would have been questioned, and the people who got that marks unnecessarily would have been questioned, which is not fair to the students who did well because they did well, and instead of the others who just put tukka and may God have got it, right? So that is the point. I'm talking about it from, maybe employers down the line saying that year your university results were not good, or prospective further education people saying it. Now, because the entire world is in a soup, it's fine. This is okay.
If
so take advantage.
If I pass this exam, that will be the best thing happened to me in the past 2 years. Please let me pass this thing.
I am not in charge of it. You can very, very well pass. All right. Yeah. No, you can. You can. It is just about common sense, being confident, and having read the concepts to some extent. And it's not even a very deep dive for most of the questions. Passing is not really supposed to be a problem if you have done some basic reading. Okay. I am sorry. I will take your leave now, but I'll meet you tomorrow at 6. It's been, I can also see Ritu and everyone is really tired. So
today I'm in a better position, and from the beginning I could sense that today you are slightly.
I am really tired. Yes. Yeah, I'm not
so zoned out. Yes.
So but anyway,
have enough rest, and we'll meet tomorrow with fresh energy.
Tomorrow. Yes. Yeah, tomorrow I'll be back.
Thank you so much. Have a nice
evening. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Thank
you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.